Hello and welcome to my channel. Today I will be talking about Booktube's favourite books. Now, I know there is a lot of discourse on, we'll call it discourse, because that's the nicest way of describing it. There's a lot of discourse on book Twitter, book talk, Booktube, about how certain creators only read the same 5 books, and it's really difficult to get a wide variety of recommendations when everyone's reading the same thing, etc. None of that's true, of course, although I see all the time people saying that. It's just not true. And it's really hard when you want to tell people that's not true, but you haven't got like evidence. Like it feels like you're just talking about your opinion versus their opinion and what makes your opinion more valid than theirs. Evidence. So that's where the petty bitch in me decided I'm going to find some evidence. I'm going to prove a fucking point, and I'm going to prove that actually if you watch a variety of different content creators, you're going to get a variety of different book recommendations. And if you're just dipping your toe into Booktube or Book Talk or Book Twitter, yeah, you are going to see the same 3 authors come up all of the time because they've got a shit ton of books and people enjoy reading them because they're a good time. So this is not me slandering Sarah J. Maas or Leigh Bardugo or Brandon Sanderson because they have like 80 books out. This is me explaining to you in minute detail which books were popular during which months, why I think that was, and how we can have the audacity to say that we're all reading the same thing when that's just not true. So how did I get here? Well, petty bitch aside, I needed to find a way of tracking books that were being read. Now, not every booktuber uses book Twitter, book Instagram, book talk, Goodreads, although I really wish you did. And not every booktuber is going to wrap up in the same way. Some of them might do reviews. Some of them might do just standard wrap-up videos. Some of you don't wrap up at all. You just put them in vlogs. So I needed a consistent type of content where I could track the books being mentioned to see if, when it comes to recommendations, those books are coming up again and again and again. Because chances are you get 100 people in the same room, at least 2 of them are going to have something similar on their list. Right? Like that's just statistics. I decided to do TBRs because in theory, TBRs are the books that you're most excited to read that month. So whether you enjoyed them or not, they're the books we're reading the most and therefore are going to be the books that we're more likely to recommend to others. It just seemed to make sense. The maths added up for me. So I decided to do TBR videos, and it also meant that I didn't have to watch every single Booktube video, every single TikTok, etc. because who has the time? But then if I'm going to do it as a social experiment, I need to have a control group. So how do I do that? Oh, genius. There are a whole collection of Booktubers that just do a TBR video for the entire year, right at the start of the year. And even in that, I could see that there were a couple of Booktubers that, even though they were different ethnicities, genders, sexualities, there are still books that are coming up more than once. So the control group has proven my point. So then it became a thing of like, okay, time of year is going to make a difference. Tastes are going to change. The books that people are recommending are going to change. We've got readathons, we've got read-alongs, we've got book clubs, all these things encouraging people to read similar books. And that's going to make an impact. So what I have done is I have created an entire spreadsheet of every single book 131 booktubers TBR'd. Now, I had to do it 131 times. Originally, I was just going to do it 100 times, but there were a few people that I followed their TBRs that either missed a couple of months or they had other things on or they were working. It's been a really weird year, so for consistency's sake, I made sure that I had at least between 60 and 80 TBRs a month to analyse. And then I put it all in a spreadsheet so that we have monthly champions and we have a yearly champion. Now, in theory, this is just as much a popularity contest as it is on Goodreads, right? Because it's a case of the more those books come up, that's what's going to make it the champion, is the fact that it comes up a lot. It's almost like you're casting a vote without even realising you're casting a vote. And it's also like you're casting 5 or 6 votes a month for 12 months. So there's going to be more chance for different books to come up, as opposed to this is the one author that I'm going to champion throughout the entire year, even though I read none of their books this year. It's just the author I recognise on Goodreads. Do you know what I mean? Or the book that you're like really excited to get to. That's how I vote on Goodreads, is I kind of, if I haven't read anything in that category, I pick the one that I'm excited to read based on the description, etc. if I've not read it yet. So we all vote however the fuck we want, like, but it is a popularity contest. This is no different, except it's on a wider scale. So it's looking at books that you weren't necessarily consciously thinking, Hannah's going to put this in a video, because I've only told like 4 people since January that I was doing this. So you're not necessarily putting it in for that, but you're putting them in because you're doing read-alongs, you're doing readathons, because you're excited about the book. All of those things, all of those reasons have gone in as well, so that you can see why they're coming up. So here it is. Here are the monthly champions. Enjoy.
Okay, let's start with January's champion board. Now, there were 489 books TBR'd in January, of which 56 made it onto multiple TBRs, so essentially were TBR'd more than once. Only 14 books, however, made it onto the champion leaderboard. That is 8 for achieving the copper status for being TBR'd 3 times, 5 achieved the silver status of being TBR'd 4 times, and 1 achieved gold status for being TBR'd 5 times. So that book that achieved gold status actually only accounts for 1.02% of the number of books TBR'd this month. 3% of book titles had at least 3 readers, 14% of books were repeated at least once, and the most popular author was Sarah J. Maas, which accounted for 3.07% of the number of books, which when you think about it is really not a lot. I'm now going to go through those champions in reverse alphabetical order. So in the copper category, like I said, achieving 3 out of 131 TBRs, we had Slay, Pride and Prejudice, Pride, Law, Graceling, From Blood and Ash, An Ember in the Ashes, and A Deadly Education. In silver, having all been TBR'd 4 times each, we have The Midnight Library, The Assassin's Blade, Ship of Destiny, Keeper of the Lost Cities, and A Court of Mist and Fury. And in gold, we have, with 5 TBRs in total, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. And if you're starting to think, Hannah, you set up this whole thing to prove a point and you've just proven yourself wrong, I mean, yes, but also 3 of those books were part of read-alongs. So A Court of Mist and Fury, there was a reread of Akamath and Akatar, etc. in relation to the new release of A Court of Silver Flame that was coming out. There was also Tog-along, where a whole bunch of booktubers were rereading the Throne of Glass series and included the novellas as well. And of course, Ship of Destiny is part of the ongoing Elderling Along read-along, which is obviously hosted by Beck in the Books, Ashley from Frolic Through Fiction, Jade from JD Reads, Cody from Cody's Book Corner, What Cass Read, and the Psycho Nix. So if you follow any or all of those booktubers, you will have seen that quite a bit, to be fair. And then Keeper of the Lost Cities was the middle grade monthly book club pick. So again, wasn't really surprised to see this come up quite so high. And actually, it's interesting because a couple of the sequels come up later on, but they never actually make it into champions. I just remember seeing that title a lot. It was obviously very popular. Okay, so February, we were all feeling really ambitious considering there are fewer days in that month than all of the others. And we tried TBRing 538 books, of which 79 books were in multiple TBRs, and there were 8 champions in total, obviously coming out more often. I'm sure you can guess what they were, but I'm holding in suspense just a little bit longer. So the champion book took up 1.12%, so slightly more than the previous one, but Sarah J. Maas rocked the most popular author for February, I can't say February, with a whopping 9.85% of all the TBR'd books in Feb. But I do just want to say, before we even, I know I wrapped it up at the end of the last section, but I did just want to say straight up that there were 8 books by Sarah J. Maas that made it onto TBRs in February, but Sarah J. Maas as an author only came up 19 times, which means that's essentially 2.3 people picking up a different Sarah J. Maas book, and that's still only 2.3 people per book out of 131. So whilst, yes, there are a lot, but a spoiler for moving forward, Sarah J. Maas does not make it into the gold category for any of the following months, and doesn't even make it into the gold category for this month either, so bear that in mind. So in the copper category, with 4 TBRs each, and in reverse alphabetical order again, we have When No One Is Watching, The Get a Life Chloe Brown, Clap When You Land, A Court of Wings and Ruin, and A Court of Silver Flames, which obviously was going to be TBR'd quite a few times as it was a new release. Then in the silver category, we have Legendborn being TBR'd 5 times, and Black Sun. And then finally, in the gold category, being TBR'd 6 times, we had From Blood and Ash. Now, I assume this is because there was another new release coming out shortly afterwards. I know that the series has carried on into 4 books currently, and I think there's another 2 more to come. So I'm assuming that's why From Blood and Ash was so popular. And also because once people have read all of A Court of Thorns and Roses series, you need some more that's kind of similar. From Blood and Ash is a pretty easy one to reach for. Okay, so March is a short and sweet list for you this time. So in March, we TBR'd 525 books, of which 51 were multiples, so that's just under 10%. There are only 4 champions because I tried to pick the top 4 highest numbers, but I put kinda there because there is one that was TBR'd multiple times, more than others, but still wasn't high enough to be a champion, but I think it's going to be worth mentioning, and I will mention it at the end. The champion book actually worked out as a percentage of 1.52%, which is interesting because at the end of the day, 5% of the books this month had at least 3 readers, 12% of book titles were repeated at least once. The most popular author of March was actually Leigh Bardugo with 3.05 of all TBR'd books in March, and again, I'm sure you can guess as to why, but I'm not going to give the game away. I will keep going with my little list. So in the copper category, actually before we get to the copper category, I just want to say that A Court of Silver Flames was TBR'd 5 times. So obviously it came out slap bang in the middle of the month, so some people were TBRing it in March, which was fine. So I've made a note of that, but again, it wasn't quite high enough to get into the copper round. In March, we had 2 books that were TBR'd 6 times, and obviously you've seen it on the screen. It is The Gilded Ones and Amari and the Night Brothers. In the silver category, we have Six of Crows. Now this is the one where I was like, I knew you guys would guess this is what it was. Obviously, Shadow and Bone was coming out mid-April, so this was people getting in early their favourite books of Leigh Bardugo in preparation for Shadow and Bone. Obviously, there was a Six of Crows tie-in in the TV series. People were really excited about that, and obviously people had TBR'd it 7 times. There were quite a few Shadow and Bone. There were 4 Shadow and Bone TBRs, but I think people made the right choice in choosing Six of Crows over Shadow and Bone. I've still not seen the series. Don't at me. And then in gold, back to the list that you're actually here for, we had Truth Witch with 8 TBRs. Now, this was part of a read-along hosted by Reads, and obviously, again, we had some really big booktubers that were on this, and it's really interesting because you can see the rest of the Witch series popping up here and there in other lists later on, but they do go down in number, which is interesting, and I don't know if it's just because people weren't enjoying the series as much, or if it was just a case of the booktubers that I was following just weren't mentioning it in their TBRs. It could have been a mixture of the two. I personally didn't really enjoy Truth Witch, so that was more of a read-along that I was kind of passively acknowledging as opposed to engaging in. So let me know in the comments down below if you read the Truth Witch and if you actually finished the series or if you got lost a little on the way. I'd be really interested to know because, like I said, I think it was interesting that this one made it into the gold category because I think this was one where it was really obvious that booktubers were carrying it into that leaderboard, and I just think that's really interesting. So April was a weird one. We decided to up our TBR list even higher. We TBR'd 655 books in total. And if you wonder why I keep saying we, it's because I did absolutely include my own TBRs in this list. Mainly to see if I was influenced by this list, but also because I read some really random books this year. I was reading also a lot of books this year and I just wanted to include it. I wanted to be involved. There were 69 books in multiple TBRs, 24 champions. It's going to be a long old list for this one. The champion percentage for April was 0.76%, and the most popular author was Leigh Bardugo, who took up 2.29% of all the TBR'd books. Again, not surprising, as this is when Shadow and Bone was coming out, so people were still cramming in those Leigh Bardugo reads. So again, in reverse alphabetical order, for the copper category, we have These Violent Delights, The Night Circus, The House in the Cerulean Sea, The Gilded Ones, Strange the Dreamer, Rule of Wolves, People We Meet on Vacation, Morning Star, From Blood and Ash, Every Vow You Break, Elantris, Act Your Age Eve Brown, A Dark and Hollow Star, and A Court of Silver Flame. And then in the silver category, we have Fireheart Tiger, Fool's Errand, Honey Girl, Legend Born, Law, Six of Crows, Skullduggery Pleasant, The Ravens, The Unbroken, and Wind Witch. And I will explain the Skullduggery Pleasant bit in a sec because this is mainly why I wanted to clarify why I keep saying we, etc. Right, and then in the gold category, we have To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. Now, the reason I wanted to clarify about Skullduggery Pleasant, I have been hosting a read-along all year where I work my way through the Derek Landy books of the Skullduggery Pleasant series. There are 14. The Faceless Ones is the third in the series of 14. And what's really interesting about that is when I actually noticed other booktubers putting Skullduggery Pleasant in their TBRs. Obviously, I was talking to other people about Skullduggery Pleasant anyway, so it's one of those ones where it's included because statistically it was relevant to the stuff that I was doing, but also this one is definitely more relevant to me as a reader than possibly you, because if you're not interested in Skullduggery Pleasant, you're like, why is this even here? That's why. Because when you create a community around yourself of people that read the same sort of thing as you, eventually you're going to have an influence on what they read as well. So this was like the first time that I'd really seen my influence. And like I said, we'd started in Feb, so it was a couple of months in after it had finally picked up. Book 3 is when I finally noticed it. And it was a really nice feeling to see that people are actually jumping in on your read along. And it's so bizarre to me that we're nearly done. We will be done in April of next year. So it would have been a full year of influencing. And then I'll just retire. It's fine. But yes, obviously you had Fool's Errand, which came up, which is again the Elderling Along, and the Wind Witch came up again. But that manga series, it really threatened to be a crazy outlier that I just didn't need for this experiment. So May is going to be another super rapid one because we don't have many champions for this month either. So in May we TBR'd 628 books, 76 of which were in multiple TBRs. As I said, we have 6 champions, and the champion book equated to 0.96% of all of the books TBR'd in April. 4% of the book titles had at least 3 readers, and 15% of book titles were repeated at least once. So the most popular author for May was Leigh Bardugo, again with 1.59. I do just want to say that Robin Hobb was a really close second, because whilst Leigh Bardugo books were TBR'd 13 times, as in 4 books between 13 people, Robin Hobb was TBR'd 10 times, so not too far behind. So just goes to show that, again, the read-alongs do make a difference, and people were starting to pick up those books as well. So let's talk about the champions. Again, we'll do them in reverse alphabetical order. We have in the copper category, We Hunt the Flame, House of Hollow, and Fool's Errand. Obviously, it's been carried over from a month. I think this is when people were starting to get a bit tired, or were catching up, or were just TBRing both, etc. In the silver category, we have Wind Witch and An Ember in the Ashes. And in the gold category, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea. So obviously it was starting to pick up again. I know that there was another release in September, so we did start to see The House in Cerulean Sea coming up again and again as people were preparing for that new release. I believe it's called Under the Whispering Door, which is the newest release by TJ Klune in that series. Okay, so June was Pride Month, and that is relevant because actually there were quite a few LGBTQ books which made it onto the champions list, but also some brand new LGBTQ releases, which we love to see. So just to run through the standards, number of books TBR'd, we had 620. There were 69 books which made it onto multiple TBRs. There were 24 champions, and the champion of June made up 0.97% of total numbered TBR'd books of June. 5% of books had at least 3 readers, and 13% of book titles were repeated at least once. We had a joint top author with 13 books TBR'd each, and that was Alice Oseman and Brandon Sanderson. Not a massive surprise, since Brandon Sanderson has such an extensive backlist, and Heartstopper Volume 4 finally released in June, which was really exciting, and obviously people were rereading the series because where it's a graphic novel, it's quite easy to catch up. But there were several other Alice Oseman books which were also TBR'd, but it was Heartstopper that made it into the championship list. So I'm giving it a little bit away, but I'll just get onto the copper and then you'll understand. So again, in reverse order, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue with TBR'd 3 times each, The Extraordinaries, The Bone Season, Sight Witch, Mina and the Undead, Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow, Malice, Malibu Rising, Lost in the Neverwoods, Law, House of Hollow, Heartstopper Volume 4, Gideon the Ninth, Get a Life Chloe Brown, Felix Ever After, Cinderella is Dead, An Ember in the Ashes, and A Dark and Hollow Star. And then in the silver category, again in reverse order with 4 TBRs each, we have The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Skullduggery Pleasant, Mortal Coil, People We Meet on Vacation, One Last Stop, and Blood Witch. And then in the gold category, with 6 TBRs each, we have A Little Life. Now this surprised me because it's had a pretty mixed response overall, but if you look at the Pride Month standouts, you can see that Lost in the Neverwoods, A Little Life, The Extraordinaries, Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow, and One Last Stop were all really popular for this month's Pride Month, which is great, but I'm not sure how I feel about A Little Life. It is what it is. I know that it's been picked up quite a bit. I won't be picking it up, but that is a me problem. This isn't for you. So in July, we TBR'd 553 books, of which 49 books were in multiple TBRs. We had 14 champions, 3% of books had 3 readers, 10% of book titles were repeated at least once, and the champion percentage was 1.08%, which was the highest book, which is actually split between 2, which is going to be interesting. The most popular author in July was Brandon Sanderson, who made up 1.81% of all the TBR'd books in July. I don't know what made us think that July was the perfect time to read 800-page epics, but hey, we gave it a good go. Actually, now, it's literally now as I'm recording this that I thought maybe I should have tracked number of pages as well, but I feel like this is already a lot, so maybe good thing I didn't. Anyway, let's skip on to the copper category. So again, in reverse alphabetical order, we have People We Meet on Vacation, One Last Stop, My Dark Vanessa, In Order to Live, Heartstopper Volume 4, Graceling, Golden Fool, Skullduggery Pleasant Deathbringer, and Ace of Spades. In the silver category, we have The Priory of the Orange Tree, Project Hail Mary, and Act Your Age, Eve Brown. And then in the gold category, we actually have 2 books, as I said previously. So with 6 TBRs each, we have The Maidens and Malibu Rising. Now, I have thoughts about these 2. Obviously, Malibu Rising, I'm not surprised. People are going to finally get their hands on their copies and put them in their TBR. But The Maidens was a really interesting one because I saw it everywhere. People were TBRing this left, right, and centre. It was all over Instagram. It was all over book Twitter. And then when people were actually reading it, the reviews were not great. And I don't know if that was just because of my little bubble or just the general thoughts. So if you read The Maidens and actually liked it, please comment down below, because everyone I've spoken to since hated it. And I have to admit, I am not a massive fan of Alex McLady's style of writing. I feel like, actually, you know, time and place, Hannah. But yes, so those are our golden champions for July. Okay, so in August, we had 515 books TBR'd. With 50 books in multiple TBRs, we had 14 champions. We had 3 gold books, all of which earned 0.97% of all TBR'd books. I don't know if you're getting the hint, but generally each month, about 10% of books are getting repeated at least once, which isn't bad considering we're all TBRing a whole bunch. But I do just want to say that at this point, I was wondering if Brandon Sanderson can be the top author yet again, third month on the trot, 2.14% of all books TBR'd in August. Why don't I hear more people having a go about him when the Sarah J. Maas and Lee Bardugo discourse kicks off about Goodreads? That was my question. I mean, I get it. All 3 of them have got absolutely gigantic backlists and we're all working our way through them. And if you're like, well, Hannah, it's because people are just, you know, they're taking their good sweet time reading them. They're big old books. Of course they're going to be in TBRs. They're going to be carried over. You're wrong. You're wrong. I actually went back and checked and made sure that if a YouTuber TBR'd a Brandon Sanderson book in June, but it was a big old chunky boy and they were carrying it over into August, that I didn't include it. These are separate people TBRing this book, and Brandon Sanderson was TBR'd a further 11 times this month, as opposed to the 13 times he was TBR'd the previous month. And whilst it might be similar people or same people picking up Brandon Sanderson books, they're actually switching out which books they're reading, or they're moving on to the next one in the series. So again, I just want to say, if this hasn't proven my point that people are reading a whole bunch of stuff, I don't know when in this video that is going to... I'm going to stop because I'm starting to be that bitch. So in the cherry collection, I don't know why I called it the cherry collection. I should have called it the cherry collection instead of the copper collection. It is more of a cherry colour now that I think about it. But in reverse alphabetical order, we have, with 3 TBRs each, Witch Shadow, The Midnight Library, The Maidens, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Skullduggery Pleasant, Kings of the Wicked, that will never not be funny to me, Serpent and Dove, Rise to the Sun, For Your Own Good and Firekeeper's Daughter, which to be honest should have made it into the silver category, just saying, it's an amazing book. In the silver category, we have Take a Hint, Dani Brown and The Final Girl Support Group. Now, once again, this was a new release, or newish release by August. I think this is when the arc was coming out, and I think The Final Girl Support Group actually came out in September. Don't hold me to that. I was researching as I recorded, but at this point, I'm just kind of tired. So, in the gold category, we have for August The House in the Cerulean Sea with 5 TBRs, She Who Became the Sun, and Ace of Spades. So a nice mixture there. I'm going to try and be less passive-aggressive next month, but really, I'm not holding my breath. Okay, in September we took a drop to 480 books TBR'd in total, with the highest TBR'd book accounting for 1.46% of the TBR books this month. We had 52 books on multiple TBRs and 4 champions, and yeah, Brandon Sanderson, top author again, 2.71% this time. Anyway, so in the copper category, I'm actually going to cover a couple of the others because the books that were TBR'd multiple times were TBR'd more multiples than previous months. So we had The Final Empire, All's Well, Ace of Spades, and A Lesson in Vengeance, which didn't even make it into the copper category, but I've included it just to kind of cover that for you. We also had Dune in the copper category. Now, this does not surprise me. The TV series was coming out. There were loads of really beautiful copies for Waterstones, and I think Illumicrate did a fancy copy as well. So that was kind of like everywhere. I hope you enjoyed the film with the whole 6 seconds of Zendaya on it. And then in the silver category, we had The Maidens and Ninth House. And then in the gold category, we had She Who Became the Sun, which again, I believe this came out end of August or just middle of August, so people were finally starting to get hold of their copies. And I also believe there was another beautiful copy. I think it was either a Illumicrate book or something like that. So again, that just made sense to me that it was going to be popular. I've heard really good things. And yeah, short and sweet for September. So I'm really excited to talk to you about October because, as you probably know by now, I host a readathon called Gothtober, which encourages people to read gothic fiction books in October. We get into the spooky season, but it doesn't actually have to be scary. And you don't actually have to read anything for Gothtober, so that's always fun. For this year, we had 2 teams. We had Angels versus Demons, and we also had a death board. So there was a whole variety of different prompts, but a lot of them were very specific to dark academia and gothic tropes. So there are a lot of dark academia books that made it into the list in October, and that was really fun to see. So just to clarify the stats as I have done with the previous months, there were 623 books TBR'd in October, of which 81 of them had multiple TBRs. So I don't know if you've noticed, that's definitely more than previous months. It's more than 10%, and that is because people were reading very similar gothic books. When I get to the number of times certain books were TBR'd, it will make sense. There are 5 champions. Again, it will make sense when I get to the scoreboards. And the top book had a percentage of 1.44% of all of the books TBR'd in October. Brandon Sanderson came in with another high percentage of 2.89 of number of books, and I'm assuming that's because, again, people were just carrying on that series. I don't want to speculate too much. As I go into the scoreboards, I just want to say that obviously if you're like, Hannah, this is hella biased. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Any social experiment is. This is definitely biased because obviously I'm watching booktubers interact with things that I've created, and in this instance it's Gothtober. It's why I'm most excited, but it is also why some of these books have come up so high, so bear that in mind. So in the copper category, we had Cemetery Boys, which was such a great choice for Gothtober. That was picked time and time again. And My Heart is a Chainsaw. Can't take credit for this one. This was the book for the Literally Dead book club. I'm really glad people enjoyed that. I immediately bought it after October. I didn't get it quick enough to jump onto the book club, but it will definitely go onto my Gothtober TBR for 2022. I'm very excited. In the silver category, we had White Smoke, which was a new release, and Empire of the Vampire, which was a new release. And in the golden category, we had Mexican Gothic. Now, when I tell you that nearly all of the Gothtober TBRs that I watched had Mexican Gothic or another Sylvia Moreno Garcia book in them, you should not be surprised. Sylvia Moreno Garcia was a close second for most popular author for October because she also had a new release out, which was Velvet Was the Night, and she'd had a slightly earlier new release the same year, which was Certain Dark Things, and both of those fit quite a few of the prompts for Gothtober. So it was really nice to see those 3 books come up again and again and again. So yeah, if you then have a look at some of the Gothtober standouts, Mexican Gothic is up there, Cemetery Boys is up there, and then the 3 other books, 2 of which are definitely Dark Academia, were Ace of Spades and The Atlas 6, which was another new release, and House of Hollow was another really, really popular one. I'm assuming for this one is because it's quite a short read, and it also ticked off quite a few of the prompts that were on all 3 of the Gothtober boards. So really, really happy to see such an eclectic mix of Gothic books for October. It was a really good month, and it was when my reading kind of kicked back in, and I can see obviously from the upswing from 480 to 623 that obviously I was not the only one who was able to finally get into the spooky season. There were a couple of Dark Academia books that peppered September, but October we really leaned into the spooky season, and it's lovely to see. So November was the final month of my year-long project, and in November we TBR'd 523 books, of which 53 were in multiple TBRs, going back to that 10% of books being at least 3 readers, and we had 4 champions. The champion book had a percentage of 1.12%, and Brandon Sanderson dropped back down to 1.69%, but is still reigning champion as the author people reach for most often, which is really interesting. There were a whole bunch of books that had 3 TBRs each. However, in the copper category with 4 TBRs, we have Ninth House. In the silver category with 5 TBRs, we have Under the Whispering Door. And in the gold category, we have 2 books with 6 TBRs each. We have Amari and the Night Brothers and The Love Hypothesis. Amari and the Night Brothers, that makes sense to me. It was obviously the middle grade monthly book previously, and then Believathon in November meant that it was getting another resurgence, which we love to see, and The Love Hypothesis finally had its UK release, which is why it was starting to trickle into TBRs in November. Next, I want to narrow it down to our 3 key monthly champions of champions, if you will. In the copper category, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea with 14 TBRs. In the silver category, we have The Maidens with 15 TBRs, and in the gold category, we have Ace of Spades with 16 TBRs. However, it doesn't end there, because if you think about it, whilst all these champions of each month take into account how many times they were TBR'd, etc., readathons, read-alongs, blah, 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 we're missing the key ingredient, which is that this is over a year, so there are going to be books which are tucked between those months that maybe only had 1 TBR the first month, 2 TBRs the next, 3 TBRs the next month, etc., and gain momentum until the end of the year. So who is our yearly champion? Well, in the copper category for that, we have with 10 TBRs each, Under the Whispering Door, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, The Priory of the Orange Tree, The Poppy War, The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, The Death of Vivek Oji, Jade City, and Gideon the Ninth. Still in the copper category with 11 TBRs each, we have The Way of Kings, The Unbroken, The Once and Future Witches, The Final Empire, Skyward by Sanderson, Shadow and Bone, Plain Bad Heroines, People We Meet on Vacation, Empire of the Vampire, Daughter of Smoke and Bone, Crooked Kingdom, and A Vow So Bold and Deadly. In the silver category with 12 TBRs each, we have The Night Circus, One Last Stop, Honey Girl, Act Your Age Eve Brown, A Little Life. With 13 TBRs each, we have Take a Hint Dani Brown, 6 of Crows, Mexican Gothic, House of Hollow, and A Court of Mist and Fury. Continuing on, and now 19th in the rankings of Yearly Champion with 14 TBRs each, we have The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, The City of Brass, The Bone Season, Law, and Get a Life Chloe Brown. With 15 TBRs each, we have She Who Became the Sun and A Court of Silver Flame. And with 16 TBRs each, we have The Midnight Library, Malibu Rising, Black Sun, and An Ember in the Ashes. In the gold category with 17 TBRs each, we have The Maidens and From Blood and Ash. With 18 TBRs each, we have These Violent Delights by Chloe Gong and The House in the Cerulean Sea, Ninth House, Legendborn, and Ace of Spades. And then our ultimate yearly champion, the book that managed to sneak through even more TBRs than we realised, was Amari and the Night Brothers with 19 TBRs over the entire year. So there we have it, the real MVP of 2021, the book that was picked up the most by booktubers this year. It is a middle grade with a shiny sprayed edge, with a black debut author,
we love to see it. So yes, the next time you decide to say that all booktubers read the same thing, I'd like you to remember that there were over 3,000 books TBR'd in this year alone, which means that at the very least Sarah J Maas can't have been all of them, because she's only got, what, 12 books out? So just bear that in mind. If you're looking for more booktubers to watch because you're worried the ones that you're watching just aren't cutting it for you with the recommendations that you need, go check out that spreadsheet, because there's 131 people I think would be worth you giving your time to. And other than that, I hope you have a nice day.